Hello friends, for today's video I thought I would go through some of the books that I picked up at the end of 2023. These are not all the books I picked up, but some of them are ones that I don't know when I'll get the chance to really go more in depth with them, so I thought I would talk about them here. Some of these books actually popped up on my January TBR. I mentioned in that video that I was filming it pretty early in the month of December because I was going to be basically staying at my mom's house, dog watching her dog Dutton, who is very sweet and very cute, but the poor thing is just, he's not the brightest. And as a result, he's really quite naughty and he has no sense of right and wrong. I mean, I know it's a silly thing to say because he's a dog, but the point is that because I was going to be staying there for quite a long time, I was like, maybe these books I'll be reading in January, but if I can, maybe I'll read some of these in December because I'll be there for quite a while and I'm just going to be like by myself with this dog, so I'll probably have some reading time. And that's true. I did get around to some of the things that were on my January TBR, and then things that I have mentioned wanting to read, I will be picking those up, I promise. Again, these are just some of the things I got around to when I was hanging out with Dutton. By the way, I just want to say, I posted a cute little photo of him on my community tab, and I think some of you were like, oh, he doesn't look naughty, he looks really sweet. He destroyed my pillow. Absolutely destroyed my pillow. So there, and I like at one point I had flip-flops on and I took my shoes off for just half a second so I could like take my pajama pants off and put my regular pants on, and he just like ran and grabbed my shoe, and I'm like, no, and then his tail wags. That's what I mean by he has no sense of right and wrong. Like Luna, now if we come home and she's done something she's not supposed to, Luna is my dog if you're new, if she's done something she hasn't supposed to, you'll be like, what is this? And then she like gets all sad looking. I'm sure you've seen videos of dogs like that. Dutton, no, just like it makes him happy and you're like, and you're like, well, I really need my shoe, but I don't want to reinforce this behavior, but I really need my shoe back. So I guess I'm like, hey, what about this like little doggy cookie? What do you think of this? Anyway, let's talk about books now because it's been over 2 minutes. First up is a DNF. Most of what I'm going to talk about is fantasy. These first couple are not, and that includes this DNF, which would be Last Love Note. I was pretty bummed because it sounded like it was going to be a contemporary romance, but with a lot of heartache mixed in as you are following somebody who has found love and they've pretty much found the absolute perfect relationship, and then that person passes away and now they are a single mother and they just don't know how to love again. And the premise sounded, I thought, like it was going to be really moving, and then when the story first started it was like wacky and not what I was expecting, and I'm sure the book goes on to have a lot more depth. But there's just something about certain romance books, movies, whatever the case may be, where like the meet cute or whatever it is at the beginning, or just in general, like the introduction is zany and like, look how quirky our character is. And I don't know what it is about that, but it's just like an instant no for me. I'm just like, all right, nope, this is too much. It's like, have you seen, I've never watched that show, what is it called? The Kissing Booth, but I've seen clips where it just shows like them all falling down, like, oops, I fall and go bang. I'm just like, okay, is this supposed to make them relatable? Like, I don't mind a person falling down, but I'm just like, So anyway, at the very opening of this, she's like with her friend and her child, her young child, and they're like looking out the window and there's like this handsome man who's moving in, and they're like admiring how handsome and hunky he is, and then her son's like, mommy, look at this, a grenade, and she's like, oh my gosh, and she's like, it's not real though, my husband was just a collector of interesting old things, and her friend's like, I think that might be real, and then like the police come, and then like the hunky guy notices them looking at them, and he comes over, and she's like, okay, there's an emergency, I have this grenade, it might be, and I'm like, what is this opening? And maybe you're like, that sounds fun and unique and different, and I was just like, I don't like it. So anyway, that's why I DNF'd The Last Love Note. Next up, we have The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. This is actually sort of a sequel to The Maid, which when I mentioned that I was interested in picking this up, I didn't actually know if they were related or if it was just going to be a maid novel where it was following another cozy mystery with a different maid, I suppose. I didn't really know if we were following the same person. You are following the same person. In the first book, I feel like the character not quite always picking up on social cues really played a big role in the way that she navigated this murder and the police questioning her, and you felt so strongly for her because you can see that she is not processing, like you can feel what the other characters are thinking of her based off of her answers, but she doesn't understand, and you're like, oh, don't say it like that. And she's, not the murderer, but you're like, but the way she's talking makes her sound guilty, and you just need somebody, you want to reach into the book and intervene and speak on her behalf. And in this one, it's less her, and it's more another person who's being looked at, and now you're seeing her sort of be that the person that's intervening, and she's kind of helping this other individual. So that was kind of nice to see. I did feel like it was pretty obvious, the mystery, pretty much as soon as the what ends up being the big reveal at the end. When you first sort of see, it's a mystery, so I'm trying not to give things away, but like I knew immediately. I'm like, okay, well, it's that there. I was like, that's it. And it was. I don't think it was really about that, though. It was more kind of actually the main character's past and a relationship she had with her grandmother, and this working woman who's doing her best to take care of this young child, a young child who the system is kind of not really working to help. And I actually thought all of that was quite well done. It was just the modern day mystery, which is arguably the main point of this book, that was pretty mediocre, which is fine, because I liked the other parts. I did like the first book quite a bit more, I think, just because it felt a little like a repeat of the first one in some ways, just with the a different person taking the role that our main character fell into in the first one. And I also just thought that the mystery itself in the first one was a lot better done. But still, just like a nice break from a lot of the fantasy that I typically pick up. Next up is a book that I mentioned having read in another video where I talk about series I want to continue on with, and that would be Green Rider. I just haven't had a chance to actually talk about this book, and Sarah from Fairy Reads is somebody who quite likes this series. I feel like it's because of Sarah that I was more excited to pick this series up, where somebody I think sent this to me years ago, and this is the first time I've gotten to it. But Sarah being like such a big fan and really liking this series is kind of what really pushed me, I guess you could say, to pick it up now. I always planned to eventually pick it up, but that was sort of a catalyst. But anyway, this is falling more into the feeling of classic fantasy, quest fantasy. You follow this young woman who is very bright, and she sticks up for other people. That does get her into trouble at this school that she was going to. And now she's sort of on her way to try and explain to her father why she has been kicked out of this school, because she basically told off a bully who was a wealthy person's son, sort of thing. And so that person got special treatment. She was kicked out, and so she wants to explain everything to her father. So she's on her way to do that. And this man, this person who is clearly some kind of messenger, who is injured, comes running through, and they're telling her, like, you have to deliver this message. You don't understand. You have to deliver this message. She's like, okay. And she promises this dying man that she will deliver this message, and she doesn't really know what she's supposed to do and how to deliver this message for him, but she decides, like, he died, like, in my arms. I have to try to honor his dying wish, because she is a very honorable, principled person. And this task takes her on this very dangerous quest, and pretty much immediately people are after her. There's also mysterious magic that you see glimpses of, but the way the magic's done, it's somewhat soft, but it just feels like, oh, there's so much more to magic than these people even know. Like, there's so much to explore, I guess, and so much to discover is the feeling, as opposed to, oh, I guess magic can just do anything. You could read it that way, I suppose, but to me it just felt like they clearly don't know everything magic is capable of, and so you're kind of discovering that alongside the character, and their sense of whimsy to some degree. This is this is classic fantasy in a way that I really like, where it feels cozy. I really genuinely just felt like, oh, I want to curl up next to a fire and like hear the birds outside in the woods, and there's just something about it that created that feeling. And it's not cozy in that there's low stakes. It's just cozy in that it transports you somewhere else, and you really feel like you're on this adventure with this person. I also found there were some really wholesome moments with the character and some of the people that she meets as she embarks on this quest. So I really enjoyed it. I am excited to see where it goes from here. It does that thing a lot of more classic feeling fantasy does, where at the end of this first one, you kind of get this feeling of, okay, well, the big bad's not really dead or really gone or no longer a threat, but it feels like this story feels rather satisfying in the completion of its arc by the first book. I feel that we don't do that as often anymore, which I don't mind, because I think it's a shift in publishing where you actually find authors who want to write a series. Publishing is more behind them writing a series. They don't feel like they have to wrap things up too much at the end of their first books. But I really enjoyed that first one, and I am excited to see where it goes from here. And the series isn't done. I think there's like 8 books in the series at this point. So I am hopeful. I am hoping to continue on with this series as the year progresses, and maybe I can catch up and then be eagerly awaiting what I believe is the 9th book. After that, we have a couple that I have talked about, and that would be Rhythm of War and Oathbringer. These were the finishing touches to the Cosmere read-along that I hosted this year. So there are now discussion videos for all of the main novels. There is a video, kind of Mistborn Era 1 versus Era 2, and there's not specific videos for Mistborn, as that was read at the end of 2022, leading up to the Lost Metal, but you do have that contrast video, and then you have Warbreaker, Elantris, the Secret Projects, these, and I have to say it was I'm going to stop holding these because they're heavy. It was kind of an odd feeling to go from Oathbringer to Rhythm of War, because the first 2 books, Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, I knew I loved those, and I was so excited to be back. I was really kind of hesitant and nervous to go into Oathbringer because it was my least favorite the first time around, but I was like, hey, I've been enjoying the first 2 books even more, so maybe that'll happen with Oathbringer. And with Rhythm of War, I was weirdly nervous because I'm like, oh, I loved it so much the first time that now I'm nervous that rereading it, it's not going to meet that level of hype that I've placed on it. And it was like both things became more extreme. My frustrations with Oathbringer grew, and then my love of Rhythm of War increased. And I do always find it interesting to see people's different opinions with the Cosmere. I believe by the time this video goes up, I'll have redone my Cosmere tier ranking after having reread and then gotten the Secret Projects. The 3 of the 4 were Cosmere related. So I'll have that linked if it is up by the time this goes up. But it's just so different from person to person. I think a lot of what it comes down to is who is your favorite character? What parts of the Stormlight Archive do you really love? What do you connect with? What are you fascinated by? Luna Bear's right over here, so she's maybe going to make an appearance. We'll see. But anyway, I just think that it's not that one is better than the other objectively. It's that we just all connect to it differently, as is the case with all books. And for me, Oathbringer is just not on par with the others, but Rhythm of War is so good in my opinion. I love it so much. I'm so nervous for Wind and Truth. I'm so scared. I'm scared for a lot of different reasons. I'm like, oh, I don't want the first arc anyway. I'm like, I don't want it to be over. I really don't think it's going to end on a happy note. And I'm like, please, my favorite characters don't die, and don't have anything bad happen to them. And then I'm also like, what if it's not good? I mean, I'm sure it's going to be good, but there's always that fear at the end of a series where you're like, what if there's Luna's nose. I'm like, what if it's just not, it's like she's concerned for me. Like, Mom, why are you getting agitated? Anyway, there's just always a fear that it's not going to live up to everything you were hoping. I'm sure it will, but I'm just scared. Anyway, it was great rereading the Cosmere. I had such a good time with it. Rhythm of War, though, it's just such a standout for me. I love, love, love Rhythm of War. So happy to have read that, to have reread the Cosmere books. And I'm really excited for this year to be making a lot of fun Cosmere-themed videos now that so many of you also kind of reread or read for the first time the Cosmere. I think this year's going to be really fun leading up to Stormlight 5, even though I'm terrified. Next up, we have a nonfiction book, which would be Cobalt Red. This is a book that I honestly think everybody should read. It is a very difficult read, not difficult as in, oh, it's so dense I can't understand. Difficult as in very emotional, and one of those books where you read it and you feel completely helpless. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that feeling of, why are some of us given so much when so many people are given so little? Or not even just given so little, their lives are just so challenging and so difficult. And also, to make things even worse, their lives are difficult because our lives are so good. And if you don't know, Cobalt Red goes through the way in which the people of the Congo are essentially in modern slavery, because cobalt is used in smartphone. I mean, I actually tabbed a list of all these different things that it's used within. Electric cars and phones being two of the big ones. But there's a ton of other things it's used within, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere anytime soon. Here I have the thing. In carbides used to make cutting tools and materials used for dental and bone surgeries and chemotherapies, and in the cathodes of rechargeable batteries. And that was the top of that page. There's also, I'm probably blocking the microphone right now, but now I'm blocking my face. I'm a mess right now. Cobalt is used in the manufacture of super alloys for turbines and jet engines, and then the other things I mentioned. So it's not going away. Cobalt mining is not going away. So what is the solution is kind of what you're left with. And it seems like the solution is, it's not something that me or you can probably make happen, because we're not the ones who are running these massive corporations. We're not the ones making the deals. But at the end of the day, we can make certain decisions that lower the amount of demand for things like smartphones, anything that's rechargeable. We can not always run out and buy the next iPhone, which I'm not somebody who's done that anyway. But it just makes us, I guess, more informed. I really don't think I'm doing a very good job of highlighting why this book is so vital, why I think everybody should read it. But the atrocities, the horrors that these people experience, and the way in which they have to risk their lives every day just to try and make enough money to eat. That's basically it, trying to make enough money to eat. And there's all these companies that insist that they do not allow for child labor, but there's a very easy work around that, which is that children are still working. They're right next to their parents working, and then they just don't get paid. They're not employed. They just hand the materials to their parents, and their parents turn those in. And everybody around knows there's kids right there. They can see them. But because they're not employed, we don't employ children. We don't have child labor. But those kids are right there. They're exposed to, as are the adults, they're exposed to a lot of harmful things. They risk dying in tunnels, being buried alive, having, being injured to the point where their lives are severely affected from then on out, not being able to get the care they need, the surgeries they need, because they have no money. Just every awful thing you can think of. Also, the amount of assaults that take place on women. I mean, the author met women as young as 14, 15, which aren't really women, those are children. And they had babies on their backs as they're working, and they have to keep working because they have no money. So just stuff like that where you're like, well, this is awful. And I think the world would be a lot better of a place if at the very least we're aware of these things. I'm not trying to sound preachy or anything. I genuinely think everybody should read that book. It can be a little repetitive at times, as the person who wrote it kind of goes from one mind to the next and is like, this is all the ways in which this mine is basically just like the last one, except for this one minor difference. And like, this mine actually isn't run by this group. It does this differently, but it still takes part in this other thing. So it can feel repetitive, but I mean, what's that to any of us, right? Like, oh, it's so hard to read a passage that's like kind of like the last passage, because it's like, oh yeah, sure, that's tough. You know what I mean? Like, it's dumb to complain about that when we're basically saying like, I don't want to read another sob story. That's what it feels like. So I'm just letting you know though that you might have to take breaks from it, because, and that's a very privileged thing to say, but it can be pretty difficult. There were some passages that I was like, oh my gosh, like I just was pretty close to crying reading a lot of that book. So anyway, Cobalt Red, very good. The full title, Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives. Highly recommend. Anyway, moving on to something else. I have read all of the novellas in Murderbot, and I now just have, at the time I'm filming this, the 2 novels left. So I am very excited to basically almost be all caught up. I do not think that Murderbot has catapulted into being a new all-time favorite, but I have greatly enjoyed it. I just think they're a lot of fun. They capture kind of the day-to-day annoying things about being alive, we'll say. Not even being a human, but being alive, because Murderbot isn't necessarily exactly like human beings, yet there is a sense of being alive, you know, and they have anxiety and they get nervous and they don't always know how to handle certain situations. They try their best to kind of calm humans down, but sometimes they just cannot be bothered with humans. Sorry, there's one of Luna's hairs is flying around. She's shedding right now too, so after I pet her, my sleeve is covered in dog hair. But I do find them very enjoyable. My husband has to see a lot more customers on a day-to-day basis. I used to work retail, I used to work in fast food, and I used to teach. So I have a lot of different areas of experience with working around humans, you could say, other people. And each different kind of interaction results in just human interaction is very odd and funny. And I think that these show the ways in which human beings are flawed, but ultimately likable, and our main character, Murderbot, is as well. The reason it's not probably I won't probably ever consider it a new favorite is just because I feel like they don't quite have the depth that I would like. I'd certainly think that the themes of depression, anxiety, and trying to live within a society that feels like you are outside of it or that you don't quite fit within it, I think those themes are well done and they're certainly present. I just don't find that they reach the depths that I would like. And then on top of that, the plots, I couldn't care less about any of them. I don't mind because it's not really what I'm coming back to Murderbot for, but I do think if the plots were a little more engaging and if I felt maybe a little more fear or worry or like more on the edge of my seat for Murderbot and then some of our other characters that show up throughout, I think I would maybe enjoy them a little bit more. Still very enjoyable, just not new all-time favorites, but I have had a lot of fun with these, and I think they are kind of a nice breath of fresh air. If you're somebody who, to use the Stormlight Archive example, if you're somebody who appreciates the themes involving Kaladin's character, for example, but you're like, I just feel like it drags sometimes. Like, I feel like we're too in it. Then maybe Murderbot would be more for you. I'll also add, if you're somebody who likes the same thing, the concept of exploring Fitz from the live ship, or not live ship series, that's like the one series Fitz isn't in, the Assassin's Apprentice, you know, and a lot of other things in the realm of Elderlings. But if you feel similarly to what I just described about Kaladin, just replace it with this, same thing. Maybe you would enjoy Murderbot a little bit more. And then the last thing would be, and this is kind of a goofy thing to mention, but I did, get back to this. So I think a lot of you know that I recently finished writing my second book. It is the sequel to the first one, which would be Peace and Turmoil. And it won't, be out for a bit because I'll have to have it professionally edited and then formatted. And there's a lot that goes into the final product after having finished the actual writing of the draft. So it won't be out for a while, but I really wanted to read through the first book again for continuity purposes. And so that's what I did. I read through the first book, Peace and Turmoil. And if you don't know, this follows a wide range of different characters from different places, and you're seeing the way in which all of them are kind of interconnected, even though with this being the first book in an epic fantasy, not all of their plot lines lead them, the characters, to actually come together, but you're kind of seeing how maybe they will in the future. It's quite politically driven, especially in the latter half. It gets very political, a lot of scheming, a lot of certain characters trying to manipulate a certain situation, and then someone else will do something, and now they're trying to tweak their version of manipulating the situation, and blame being cast on certain people for certain things, and then also sort of certain aspects of magic or magical beings being introduced that really are outside of the character's knowledge. And rereading it was very, let me rephrase. Listening to it, because I have had an audiobook done. It's not out yet, but I got to listen through the whole thing, and the narrator is so good. He's so good, and I cannot wait for the audiobook to be out just for you to hear his voice, because he's incredible. I always was hoping, because there's so many different characters from so many different places, that if I ever was going to have an audiobook done, I was really hopeful that the narrator would be able to bring so many of the different characters to life, to be able to do different kinds of voices, different inflection, different accents, and he is so good. So I listened through the whole thing, And it was very surreal and odd. I mean, it's been enough time where I'm not so close to it anymore. And it is kind of an odd experience to read something I wrote because of that obvious connection I have to it. But it's interesting in that my perception of it, I used to think it was really slow. I think because it's the first in a series, and this first book is very introductory. I've always known where it was going to go, and I knew what was going to happen next in the next book, which is Remnants of Dawn is the title. But I think because it was introductory and you kind of take a little bit before it gets going, I think in my head I thought, oh, it's so slow moving. And then rereading it, I'm like, I feel like it moves pretty fast. Once you get to a certain point, it moves really fast. And I am excited because the next book, and I always intended it to be this way, the second book, there are a lot more really in-depth character moments, and you get to know the characters a lot better. But I'm really excited because it kind of makes it so that if you were to reread the first one after reading the second, it puts a lot of things into perspective. And I was a little nervous that rereading it, I was like, what if I didn't really lay that the foundation well enough? And what if the groundwork's not there and the foreshadowing's not there? And then rereading it, I was like, oh, I did put that in. I put it in pretty well. And I was like relieved about that. Anyway, so it was just very interesting to reread this. I do, for anybody that's nice enough to ever check this out, first I'll say, if you haven't but you're interested, maybe wait until I mention that the audiobook's out, because he's so good. He's so good, and that's, I feel like, the way to go. Except for there are some extras, and there's like illustrations and things like that maybe you'd want to see, but I think that the story itself, the narration is so good. So there's that. But anyway, if you are somebody who has checked it out, first off, thank you. Another Luna here, sorry. I really, really appreciate it. But I do think that if you've enjoyed the first one, but maybe you're kind of waiting, I think that epic fantasy is not the thing that probably most authors would recommend anybody start their writing career with, because you generally have to have established trust with readers that you know where the story is going, you know the groundwork that has been placed, you know why it's there, you have a reason for everything. And when you've not earned that trust yet through an established career, you're really asking a lot of readers to take a chance. And I know that. It's why, like, for example, because we've been talking about Stormlight Archive, Sanderson did not start with Stormlight Archive. He wrote a lot of things before he came into that one. And then readers had this understanding, like, I know what I'm getting when I get Sanderson. I know the level of character depth. I know the complexity with the magic systems and the worlds. And so you're willing to give those giant page counts a lot more. You're more forgiving of them because you know in the long run it's probably going to really have a good payoff. I know I haven't earned that yet. And so for anybody that gives the series a chance, thank you, because I know it's not the smartest decision to start with epic fantasy. And then I'll extend that to saying that if you enjoyed the first one, the second one, in my opinion, is I think quite a step up. I think personally, for a number of reasons, but I really feel like the world opens up. The characters get so much more depth, and the way in which you see characters interacting, the way that they're same kind of similar thing with the first one, but more so and expanded on, the way that you start to see how one character's actions are going to affect things in other places. I think that is done in a way that's even more interesting, I'd like to say. So anyway, I am excited. I'll try to keep you all up to date with any kind of updates about the second one. I don't want it to take over my channel, though. I don't want it to be a thing I talk about all the time. It's just because I reread this one recently that I'm mentioning this now. That's it for a kind of end of the year wrap up for 2023. Like I said, there's quite a few other books that I have picked up that I just didn't get a chance to talk to yet, but I will be talking about soon. And I do want to say I have started Guards by Terry Pratchett. I just haven't finished Guards yet. And I will be talking about A Little Hatred and Gideon the Ninth. I mean, I'll be talking about quite a few of the things that I have said for a while that I will be getting around to. I just want to make sure that when I talk about those, I don't have as many things to get through and that they can get the time that they deserve. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope the last chunk of 2023's reading for you was great, and I'll see you all later. Bye.